friends, welcome back to my channel. It's Tori, and today I am super excited to be giving you my book review of Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. The first thing that I'm going to say in this video is that this is a spoiler-free review. I am going to be talking about some of the things that I loved and some of the things that I didn't love in this book, but I will do my best to keep it as spoiler-free as possible. Bloodsong is the first book in the Raven's Shadow trilogy. The second one is Tower Lord, and the third one is Queen of Fire. There is also a follow-up duology that kind of extends the story of the main character we meet in Bloodsong. This is a rainy day book for me. This was a book that I have had on my TBR for a really long time that I was pretty sure was going to be a 5-star read based on what I'd heard about it. It checks a lot of boxes for me. It's a military fantasy, it's a coming of age in an epic setting, and it's a motley crew. So I kind of figured that I would be here at some point giving you guys a little bit of a gush fest about this book. Spoiler alert, I loved it. Now, I am a massive military fantasy fan. I love stories of, especially the origins of great warriors in these different epic fantasy settings. I love the motley crew. I love the camaraderie, but I also find it incredibly impactful. I grew up in a family that was steeped in military history. I've always been really drawn to stories of survival and the kind of experiences in life that strip us down to our most basic behaviors and how we react to those kind of situations. So in Bloodsong, we meet Valen Al-Sorna, who is the son of a battle lord of the king of the country. He is about 10 or 11 years old when we meet him in the beginning of this book, and he is brought to the fortress of the Sixth Order of his faith. Now, the Sixth Order is responsible for training young men to become deadly warriors to protect the faith. And Valen is brought to this fortress, and he is left at the gate by his father, and now he is basically told, you have no family but the one inside these walls, and you don't get to leave. Valen, of course, is added to a small motley crew of other boys his age who are also going to be going through the training of the Sixth Order to become these warriors. I really like the way that Anthony Ryan merges the tenets of the faith and religion in this story with the military, that these young warriors are brought up to basically be warrior monks, that they have a set of rules that they have to follow to remain faithful, and some of those are the, typical tropes of you can't get married, can't have relations with women, protect the weak, etc., etc. There's a lot of mystery that's woven into this story. There are people who are still trying to take Valen's life, even as a young man when he's doing his training and he doesn't know why. There are attempts being made on the lives of the different leaders of the different religious orders around the country. The king is taking a very vested interest in the new brothers of the Sixth Order and kind of trying to take them under his wing. There's a lot going on the larger scale of this book, and that brings me to the first point that I really want to talk about. I'm going to get to characters in a minute, but the first thing I really wanted to talk about was that I love coming-of-age stories. I love them. However, I also hate coming-of-age stories because I feel like so often I go into a coming-of-age story and it ends up really being focused on relationship angst, or the world just kind of is drawn down and made to feel very small through the eyes of these young characters. Because while the world might be ending, it's still more focused on their angst of growing up. And what I loved about Bloodsong is this is true adult epic fantasy coming of age. And the reason I can say that is because at no point during this entire story did I ever feel like the world was smaller than the characters. And I love that feeling. I felt like these characters were drawn into a world that was way too big for them, and they're forced to basically become small adults way too early. And there's just this massive scale to the world and the things that are going on, and these young characters are just kind of thrown into the middle of that. I love that. I love when I come across a true adult epic fantasy world with young protagonists that feel very much their age. There was never a point where I doubted, well, they just don't really feel like young characters. They did, especially in the first half of the book. Anthony Ryan really found that balance of adult fantasy world and setting and conflict, and young protagonists being thrown right into the middle of it, and really hitting that perfect harmony between those two things. When it comes to the characters of the story, very often in tales like this, my favorite character is actually a side character, not the main character. So when I met Valen in the beginning of the book, I immediately kind of started looking ahead to the motley crew. I started thinking about, well, I wonder when the sidekick that I'm gonna fall in love with comes in, very Red Rising with Darrow and Severo kind of vibe. Valen was my favorite character, and that almost never happens for me when it comes to main characters in coming-of-age novels. Valen is such a great character. He's so nuanced, and he has the doubts and insecurities of a young boy, and also he's trying to find himself in a space that expects him to be completely grown and a man and be able to function in a world that is very deadly and, constantly throws him into the path of danger. And I love that so much. The motley crew that joins Valen in the beginning was definitely not a disappointment by any stretch of the imagination. I absolutely loved it. I did find myself at times wanting a little bit more characterization in those secondary characters, but overall, I really, really loved them. Frentis, for anyone that has read this book, love Frentis. I actually also really, really loved Norta's character, because I think that Anthony Ryan did a lot of really interesting, complex things with his character through the book. Outside of the main motley crew of boys, I also thought that a lot of the adult characters and the other, outside of the Sixth Order characters were really interesting. The king in this story is very interesting. He's giving me kind of this very slightly unhinged vibe, which is something that I really enjoyed, actually. He didn't feel like a cookie cutter epic fantasy king, which I really liked and wanted to point that out. The world definitely takes kind of a backseat to the characters. This is an incredibly character-focused novel, and I am not mad about that, because you guys know that is what I love. Anthony Ryan does a really good job of just revealing the world little by little through the story, and the conflict and the settings slowly get bigger and bigger and bigger. We do end up going to other countries. They all have different cultures, and I like when you can see contrasting ideals between different cultures in stories. I think that's really interesting. You see the difference between succession and royalty between one country versus another, or honor, or, the battle tactics, or anything like that. I always find really interesting when there's kind of a culture clash between ideals or strategies or anything of that nature. The world at first felt very Western European to me, but as the layers started to unfold, I started to realize that I didn't feel like I could place it anymore, which I actually also really, really love, when a world feels so much its own that my preconceived ideas of where it's set just kind of fly out the window, and I just completely embrace the world of the story, and I kind of stop trying to make it fit in a box that I can recognize. The first half of this book was a 8, 9, 10 star read for me. I absolutely loved it. It checked so many boxes for me personally as a reader. Absolutely adored the first half of this book. Once we got to the middle, there were a few things that kind of pulled me back a little bit out of the emotional investment that I had with the story. The motley crew does split up a little bit, which, is kind of to be expected in a story like this, but it felt like we'd been promised something in the intimacy of the first half of the book that then just kind of faded in the second half, and that's something that made me sad, because that's what I invested in the story for, was for Valen and the motley crew of boys around him. Valen as a main character, in my opinion, remained incredibly 5-star throughout the entire thing. I absolutely loved his character. I really liked seeing the different stages of growth that he went through as a person, as a leader, as a soldier. There were so many moral questions that Valen had to struggle throughout the entire book that were really interesting and really gave us a chance to kind of delve into his character and also look in the mirror a little bit. And I love books that ask me to put myself in a certain situation and say, what would you do? Do you think you'd make the same decision, or would you have done something different? Let's talk about the magic system. So this is an incredibly soft magic system. There is not a lot of information given, and part of that is because the people in the story don't know a ton about the magic. It's giving the idea that in ancient times the magic was much stronger, that more people knew how to use it, and that lore and knowledge has kind of been lost throughout the ages. And now people are kind of just dabbling like children in something that they don't understand. For the most part, I loved that. I'm not against a soft magic system, and in fact, most of the time I prefer that, because I do like an aspect of mystery. I don't like my magic systems to be over-explained. But there were a few moments where I needed a little bit more explanation to understand why a certain thing was happening so quickly, or it just kind of felt like it came out of the blue. But overall, the softer magic system I actually really liked, because it allowed the focus to stay more on the military fantasy aspect and also on the characters. Guys, if you like motley crew coming of age military style fantasy, epic world, this is amazing. I'm so impressed with what Anthony Ryan created here, especially in terms of characterization. But as much as I love a motley crew, I need the rest of the world to be invigorating and exciting and to draw me in as well. And that's, again, where I think this book really excels, is that behind this incredible motley crew of characters, we have a lot of mystery and magic and a world that is in conflict with itself. There are 5 books total in this series. There's 3 in the Raven Shadow trilogy, and I definitely will be continuing that in the very near future. And then there is the Raven's Blade, I think, duology. I think it's Raven's Blade. I might be wrong on that. So I'm really looking forward to finishing the rest of this series. I cannot wait to spend more time with Valen. I cannot wait to see how his legend continues to grow and how Anthony Ryan chooses to flesh out more of the world, because now that I have invested to this extent with Valen and the other characters, I am definitely ready to see how that's going to expand. So, overall, had a great time with this book. Thank you to everyone who has recommended that I read it. I really appreciate that, and you guys were right. I really had a good time with this book. If you've read it, or if it's on your TBR, let me know down in the comments below. And I hope that whatever you're reading this week, that it's a 5-star read, and I'll see you in the next video.